policy and mobility transitions are being not only shaped by technological prowess, but also by geopolitics, trade measures, and supply chain strategies. Globally, electric mobility has, as you all know, has crossed the stage of experimentation. The sales in the electric cars have crossed around 17 million already in 2024, supported by like policy measures and falling prices in several markets. At the same time, trade responses have also been at the front runner. The European Commission has imposed definitive countervailing duties on battery electric vehicles imported from China, reflecting concerns around subsidy-led competition. The United States has also sharply increased the tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, framing it as a response to unfair trade practices and strategic overcapacity. Now, India is navigating the same reality, and we are approaching it through different policy measures. And our aim is, like you already know, is not only the adoption of EVs, but also building domestic manufacturing depth, strengthening localization, and creating competitive Indian firms. In the electric two-wheeler segment, adoption has scaled quickly, and the report also notes that there has been an exponential rise in the share of electric two-wheelers from roughly 0.1% in 2019 to 6% in 2025. Now we see that the FAME and the PME drive and the other state incentives have been major anchors for the same. And the same is reflective in the recent disbursement which was done for under PME drive for around 14 lakh electric two-wheeler vehicles. Now this is a strong signal that India's electrification push is now operating at a population scale. This is exactly why today's discussion matters. When scale arrives, the design of incentives starts shaping market structure, innovation incentives, export readiness, and long-term competitiveness. Our report assesses, therefore, whether the Auto PLI scheme is delivering on its stated objectives, which include scaling domestic manufacturing, overcoming cost disadvantages, strengthening localization, and supporting innovation. The report highlights that the Auto PLI scheme has helped push production volumes upward, but the scale-based eligibility design has also created structural barriers for innovation-led OEMs that are, as we all know, very important for India's electrification goals. We'll shortly present the report to have a detailed analysis of our, to see the detailed analysis of our 4-month study that we have done on the same. But regardless, our objective is to make sure that the PLI scheme could be made more performance aligned, and more innovation compatible, so that India builds manufacturing depth while preserving competition intensity. So from this, now we will proceed to the report of the launch of the report, and followed by the presentation on the same. I would request Dr. Jayajit Bhattacharya and people from Ather and
Surender can come in.
Yeah, please.
And any other manufacturer who's here?
We can launch it for there because of the backdrop.
Right. Just 1 second, I don't know whether we are centrally positioned. Why don't you move that side? I'll move this side.
Yeah.
Look here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Out in her welcome note, the rationale for going deeper into the two-wheeler electric PLI were twofolds. One, obviously, we want to see what is the outcome of government policies, specifically on PLI, as with most policies, it achieves some of its objectives and it falls short of some of the objectives. And also there needs to be additional objectives that needs to be added when we look at this matter from an overall global perspective. The second is the fact that most of our cities are now facing tremendous amount of pollution. So we really need to rapidly adopt electric two-wheelers, electric four-wheelers, in fact electrify the entire transportation in especially urban cities. Obviously the metros have done a stupendous job, especially in Delhi, but it's not good enough. We still have IC driven engines and vehicles on the surface, and that needs to move into electric as soon as possible, because IC engines are toxic for all of us. We're dying slowly because of the IC engines. So these were the two reasons why we took up this particular analysis. Also, you will see a QR code on the presentation. It's currently covered by the camera person, but if you scan the QR code, you can get the digital copy of the report. You can also get it from our website, so either ways you can get it. Moving forward, if I can go to the next slide, please. So this is what has really happened. 2019-20 is when the PLI was declared in India for the two-wheelers. And if you look at the performance and its impact on the manufacturing of electric two-wheelers, it has been exponential. There's been a 40x growth in the last 4 years since the PLI has been introduced. So year on year, there has been the market of the total two-wheelers has gone from almost nothing to 6% of the total market. That's the two-wheeler electric market that we are talking about. So there's been an exponential growth. So hats off to all the initiatives of the government, including the FAME and then subsequently the PM E-Drive from 2024, and in addition the Auto PLI. As we know, the FAME initiative and the PM E-Drive initiative are more from the demand side. So when I go and buy an electric two-wheeler, I pay less because of the FAME and PM E-Drive. So those are subsidies to the end user. Moving to the next slide. So what did PLI really focus on? The key objectives of PLI was: one, boost domestic manufacturing of advanced automotive technology products. Where, how do we measure that? That was the objective of PLI. So as an independent analysis of the outcome, that for us translated into the parameter that what is the sales of electric two-wheelers? Did it go up or did it go down? So as you clearly see from the previous slide, it was a stupendous success. Having said that, we also need to see it in the context of what others are doing, such as China, because those are our competitors in the global platform, and therefore, is that stupendous success good enough, or we need to do more? Second, overcome cost disabilities and build global competitiveness. Where are these cost disabilities coming from? One, from the economies of scale. If again, the best comparison is China. It's got tremendous economies of scale, and when there is economies of scale, the cost per unit comes down significantly. The second is the handicap coming from supply chain resilience. If you look at any good quality scooter, electric two-wheeler, so be it scooter, be it motorcycle, you would need rare earth magnets and rare earth alloys to actually drive that particular motor, or engine, if you can call it. If you use heavy rare earth, then the power consumption is lower. And let me explain and go a little deeper into the engineering of it. If you use heavy rare earth, then the traction is higher in a smaller motor. And if that is so, not only am I able to put in more power into the smaller chassis of a two-wheeler, but also the heat that's coming out is lower, which means all my engineering into heat management becomes that much more simpler. But if the rare earth is not there in the magnet, or it's a light rare earth alloy, or if it's a non-rare earth magnet being used, then the life of the magnet is lower. The size of the motor will be much bigger to have the same kind of traction. The heating will go up significantly. The engineering impact of that will be quite significant, and the quality of the product will be largely diminished because of those differences. And when the rare earth magnets and rare earth alloys are stopped as a supply chain, or from a supply chain perspective, or even if they're allowed with an export tax. So China puts an export tax before sending out these alloys. Clearly, the end product, so downstream of any of those rare earths, will be more expensive than the Chinese equivalent, and therefore, forever, if we don't have control over that supply chain, forever will be less competitive than the Chinese, and therefore, a acid test of whether we are able to overcome the cost disabilities is to check how well we are competing in the export market. If we are beating others in the export market, then we are doing a good job. If not, then we are not solving anything, we are putting a band-aid, right? And rare earth magnets is just one aspect of it. There are a whole bunch of technologies that are involved, very, very deep technologies, which we need to ensure that we are able to gain expertise on it. And not only that, we dominate the technologies. Are we able to create operating systems for the two-wheeler which are owned by us, or is it based on Android or somebody else's or Huawei's and so on and so forth? Then we don't have control over our technologies, and the whole point of a PLI was to ensure that we are independent of others. Atmanirbharta is there in our two-wheeler manufacturing, and that leads to cost advantages. Atmanirbharta is not just because it's fashionable, but because it's got a cost implication and therefore gives us a competitive edge. The third objective of PLI was to create a robust technology base and strengthen innovation in advanced automotive technologies. And part of it we covered. What does robust technology mean? And therefore, how do we measure it? How do we know that a robust technology base has been created and is strengthening innovation in AAT? The way to do that is to find out how many patents have been filed and how many product lines have been created. And there we find very, very interesting outcomes. In fact, one of the things that we notice is that it's always the startups which are coming out with new products, including scooters, including electric scooters. Who are the players who came out with the first electric scooters? Not the existing legacy players. It was the startups. And once the startups show the way, then we see that the intervention by the government, albeit very well meaning and well thought out, actually pushes out the startups, and the legacy player starts coming in because they've got the might, they've got all the tick marks, which is in terms of turnover, which is in terms of how much of asset has been invested into, and therefore they simply move into that space and occupy that space. Do they create new spaces? Actually, it doesn't look like from the data we have gathered. So how do we incentivize the entrenched players and legacy players to create new spaces? By new spaces, I mean new technologies, new technology products, because as you notice, the market rewards those who have come out with new technology and new products. They will not reward the same old product or a dated technology. In fact, if you see in India, there are almost no American manufacturer, right? Stellantis is actually based in Europe. If you look at General Motors, Ford, and so on and so forth, there are none here. Because what we saw is that they brought in products which were dated in the Indian market. And therefore the Indian market rejected that, and that's true globally also. Everywhere people would like to have the latest products. If the latest products are coming from somewhere else, and our players who are getting the benefit of PLI are not being pushed into creating new products, then that's a challenge. The way PLI is defined is, it says if you create this kind of a product. Now this kind of product means that you know what it is. So by definition that's a problem, because innovation means that you don't know what it is. And therefore you need to figure out how do we capture what is not there, and and ensure that more people start innovating and create products and technologies that do not yet exist. And if you look at motorcycles as an example, there were no electric motorcycles in the last 5, 7, 8 years. The small ones that came out also shut shop, like if I remember, Torque based in Bangalore, it shut shop. Whereas bulk of the Indian market is motorcycles. If you recollect, one of the large scooter players simply stopped manufacturing scooters and switched into motorcycles. I'm sure all of you know who I'm indicating. But I'm looking at Saudamini, a little lost. I'm talking about Bajaj, so that's public knowledge, right? And they've done an excellent job. Bajaj did an excellent job of pivoting to motorcycles and dominating that market. But when it comes to electric two-wheelers, we see very few players getting into the motorcycles because that's a much more complex technology than scooters is. It's almost like a scooter is equivalent to a rocket which takes you to the low Earth orbit. A motorcycle is one which takes you to moon. That's a difference in terms of technology. So why are we not getting into a market which is obviously the bulk of the existing market? Then the last objective of PLI was robust supply chain in areas of advanced automotive technology products, and therefore what we tried to find out is how much of localization has happened and how much of domestic value addition compliance has happened. So that's how we analyzed the report. I'll just take a pause here and see if any of you have any questions till now, and then I'll jump back into the presentation. No? Great. Let's move forward.
Sorry, Anshi, I have
Yes,
a
please.
question,
Yeah.
Which is that, are you looking, if any, I haven't read the report, so I can't, like, know
Sure.
if it's covered, but I do have the report.
Okay.
Which is that, have you looked at the fuel efficiency norms that have come in with, the corporate average fuel efficiency regulations that were just asked for comments in July, August? Did you look at them at all when you were looking
No,
at
we didn't. Great question, but we haven't because we were super focused on just the PLI scheme.
Okay. So
Uh,
you haven't seen any supply side regulation effect on the PLI scheme at all?
No, we haven't looked at that correlation because this itself was quite complex.
Yeah.
If you look at all aspects of policy, then we would not be able to figure out what is impacting what is cause and what is effect. So we have kept ourselves very focused on just the PLI and whether the objectives of the PLI has been served or not. Now, if it has got served because of extraneous reasons, let's say war with the Iraq-Iran, the bombing of Iran, or the Ukraine war, because those also have unintended consequences. If it has grown for any other reason, good for us. We're just looking at it at a very high level. That has there been any impact since the time the PLI was introduced? But I think it's worthwhile to go back and also see the impact of the CAQM. So, how PLI is a bit of a resonance. Can we switch off that? So, how PLI eligibility prioritizes financial scale? So, the criteria for PLI eligibility was one, if the global revenues is greater than 10,000 crore or fixed asset investments is greater than equal to 3,000 crore. This is for established players. If you look at the numbers, they're huge, they're humongous, right? So that clearly excludes any new player. And there's a reason and rationale for it. The government wants players who will succeed. Right, so if you're taking public money and taxpayer money and putting it onto something, then you need to make sure that there is a return on it, and therefore there is a rationale why such large players were chosen. But in addition, they also had a segment for new non-automotive investors, which means that startups and others who are coming who do not have a legacy, but for them also the global net worth was more than 1,000 crores and a fixed asset investment of greater than 2,000 crore. I think everything stopped. Can you hear me? Yeah. So, so these numbers of greater than 1,000 crores as global net worth for a startup is impossible. It's either you're a startup or you have 1,000 crore turnover. The second is fixed asset investments. In fact, the moment you have these numbers, as per Startup India, you're no more a startup. That's another problem, right? You stop being a startup. And so that's something that we need to resolve. We understand the compulsions from the government side, but what it really leads to is exclusion of innovation in this segment. So the crucial design flaw is the eligibility design places greater emphasis on historical financial scale. So the government signaling is that the bigger you are, the better it is. Then what will new players do, and what will their investors do? They'll pour into existing models that have worked and just scale up those models. Because once you scale that up, like the Ambassador car or the Fiat Premium Padmini, you will be able to get a bulk of the market, because one, you're getting the subsidies from the government, second, you're getting the benefits of economies of scale. Why would you move to a Maruti 800 from Ambassador, right? So you will not manufacturing anything better, and that's the problem that's getting replicated in the current design of PLI. Next slide, please. And therefore, if you look at the market distortion that has happened since PLI was introduced, the I can't see the numbers from here, but about 8,61,000 is the number of units produced by the PLI beneficiaries, which is the red line, and the blue line is the startups and the non-PLI beneficiaries who were leading, but since PLI they kind of dropped off. So what it means clearly from this particular slide and graph is that because of the 13 to 16% cost advantage introduced by PLI and other subsidies, there has been a significant cost advantage that the PLI beneficiaries, who are largely the legacy players, have got, and therefore they've used that subsidy, the taxpayers' money, to crush their competition. And that's what is very clear in this particular graph. Is that what the government intended? Clearly not. The government intended more vibrancy, but that has got lost because of the way the PLI was structured. Non-PLI sales growth crashed from 407% to minus 33%. See, that's a huge degrowth that has happened. Next slide. Now, this is a very, very informative slide. You know, when PLI was introduced, you look at the top 4 players, they're all blue. On the left-hand side, 2020 that it shows. Yeah. So, all of them, all the blue ones are non-PLI players. The red one were the PLI players. As the PLI money started coming in, you see the red lines moving to the top. So using the subsidies coming from PLI and the government intervention, the PLI players started beating the non-PLI players, which in a way is also synonymous with innovation being squeezed out of the market, because the non-PLI players were largely startups. So if you look at the CR4 concentration, which is the 4 firm concentration ratio, as we speak now in FY25, 82% of the market is concentrated with the top 4. Whereas in 2020, it was only 58%. And this gets interesting when we see it in the context of China. I don't know if you have that slide in the next slide. So we'll come back to that. In China, there are over 100 players. So let's just go back to the previous slide. So in China, there are over 100 players, whereas in India, we are concentrating it and trying to start consolidation in a market which is nascent. The electric two-wheeler market is nascent. When it's nascent, you want more and more players so that there is a vibrancy, there is an explosion of innovation, there are new products that comes out. We still have the 2 wheels and a motor fixed into it, largely speaking. There has been no new kind of scooter coming out and so on and so forth, and similarly no new kind of motorcycle coming out. Whatever new innovation is coming is largely from the startups, but the startups are being relegated. They're playing in a very small part of the market. Next slide. Now another dimension, as I had mentioned right in the beginning, was to, from a PLI perspective, is see if the Indian market and Indian manufacturers are becoming globally competitive or not, which means that how much of exports is happening. And the good news is that exports have shot up, right? There is tremendous amount of exports that has happened since the time the PLI has come in. Again, in the context of China, it's nothing. In the context of the Indian status, it's huge. Now, the reasons why it has gone up and it has not gone up to the potential possible is because if you look at the pie chart, only 23% of the exports is by PLI models. 77% of the exports is by non-PLI models. So what is happening is those who has been thrown out of the Indian market because of subsidies given to the PLI models, they are trying to get market outside and they are fighting outside and they are winning. They are winning significantly, but these are the models which are not being subsidized by the government. The ones which are being subsidized by the government are happy to get more of the Indian market, because if you look at the numbers, 8,278 is nothing compared to the humongous size of the Indian market. So why bother? Why put an executive? Why put a sales team? Why put any resources into exports? Whereas the startups and the innovators are looking into the foreign market. So it's a distortion in terms of the objectives of the PLI. Let's move forward. So here is a slide I was talking about. If you look at China, I think the test market is Nepal. Let's just look at Nepal, where India was supplying 98% of the ICE scooters and motorcycles. In fact, same in Africa. The Indian manufacturing has a huge reputation in Africa, in Latin America, in Nepal, and so on. But when it comes to electric two-wheelers, we are quickly ceding the market to Chinese players. And if you look at Nepal, China holds 76.4% of EV imports. Now, what do you think is the future of electric vehicles? Is it ICE? Is it EV? Clearly, it's EV, right? Who's dominating in the EV space? We are dominating in the legacy space, which is ICE. But in the EV space, for which the PLI was made, it's China which is dominating in the neighboring country. Why aren't legacy players and PLI players getting into that market? Or is there something that we need to tweak in our PLI policy to ensure that our players are aggressively getting back in the markets that we dominate, that we traditionally dominate? And therefore, India is losing its traditional auto export dominance in the global south, and the Chinese players like Yadia and Sunra and so on have started dominating those markets. It's very difficult to get market share, and it's very easy to lose market share. So once we start losing it, it'll be a vicious cycle. Because we have lost market, we'll not have the cash to invest more. Because we don't have the cash to invest more, we'll lose more market. It's a vicious cycle. And this should be an alarm bell for our future policy creation. Next slide. So innovation is concentrated outside the PLI framework. So if you just look at the patents, and the export market is a symptom of that. The core of it is how many new patents are we filing, how many new innovations happening, and how many of these patents are actually being granted. So 1,166 patents filed by top 14 new age electric two-wheeler companies, very few by the legacy ones. And here is a timeline. You can see it in the report also. Patents by Revolt, by Aether, by Ultraviolet, and so on and so forth. If you look at Ultraviolet and Revolt, they're the ones who have stepped into electric two-wheeler motorcycles, which is the bulk of the Indian two-wheeler market. But the legacy players haven't. And that's what PLI needs to start focusing on. As we see, the challenge why PLI is getting distorted is because PLI is rewarding scale only. The market rewards innovation, as we had discussed right in the beginning. The reason some of the US automotive players did not succeed in India is because of lack of innovation. And the same problem is with PLI. If we are only focusing on scale, then we'll get back into the era of ambassador models, because that model has been approved. Let's double down on that model, and then let's create millions of that model while the market slips away from under our nose. So currently policy supports scale and not innovation. Let's move forward. And therefore, big question, who's building India's e-motorcycles? Scooters is only 35%, 65% is motorcycles. Why are we not dominating, why is electric two-wheelers not dominating motorcycles in India? And therefore, why are we not dominating motorcycles in the electric segment in the rest of the world, which is largely the global south? And the two are linked. If you look at the supply gap, you see Ultraviolet right at the top. I'll just read out some of the names: Revolt, Oben, and so on and so forth. So e-motorcycles requires very complex R&D, as I was mentioning, the thermal management, high density batteries. We have seen scooters blowing up, killing people in the early days. We have seen also cars blowing up and killing people. And by scooters and cars, I mean the electric scooters and electric cars. Because of these reasons, there is a significant amount of engineering that goes into creation of these high density batteries. When there is high density battery, there's huge amount of heat being released, and therefore some of them have even gone for liquid cooling instead of air cooling. Now, how do you put liquid cooling and all those technologies in that little frame between the two wheels? And those are the engineering challenges that we have to solve. The Chinese are solving it. We are still betting on startups to solve it without giving them the necessary support and subsidy, and in fact kind of putting them in the back foot, because the subsidies are being taken by other players who are then using that subsidy to kill off the startups by sheer scale. And as I'd mentioned, either you have a virtuous cycle or a vicious cycle. Those who are getting the PLI subsidy are in a virtuous cycle. They're getting profitability, therefore they're doubling down on scale. So they're using that money to create more capacity than using that money to create more innovation. And that's the problem. We need to have innovation. Doesn't matter from where. We don't discriminate. But clearly it's the startups who are innovating. They are ahead of the curve. So how can we make sure that the startups are getting benefited because of PLI? Next slide. The second issue is the localization fallacy. So the auto PLI schemes gives an advantage of 13 to 16%. The PM E-Drive scheme, which is the successor of the FAME scheme, which is the demand side subsidy, that gives another 4 to 5% cost advantage. Now, if you look at all those who have got PM E-Drive advantage and all those who have got the PLI beneficiary, in the middle is largely the legacy players, the TVS, Bajaj, and also one of the startups, which is Ola. If you look at the market realities today, as we speak in February of 2026, the top 4 players are dominated. Do not have any of the non-PLI players at all. It's just got one non-PLI player. Now imagine if these non-PLI players had been given PLI. Imagine the amount of innovation that have come up, the amount of exports we have had, and the ability to claw back the markets in Latin America and Africa. So that's the localization fallacy. Many of the non-PLI players qualify for PM E-Drive, which mandates strict localization. So all those tick marks are happening, but they're not getting the PLI benefits. Next slide. So the risk of inactive PLI players is another problem. Players have applied for PLI. There has been budgets that have been locked up to be given to these players, but they have not started manufacturing, which means that every year we lose, where this budget of the government is not being used. We start having an economic loss, because those who could have used that particular budget and increase the sales, therefore giving employment, therefore also creating a base for future exports and so on and so forth, they are getting disadvantaged. And therefore, how do we ensure that we have a midterm review, remove those who are not performing, and then bring in a fresh set of players who can therefore be given PLI benefits, and at the same time tweak the PLI objectives so that we are able to use the PLI budgets for the purpose it needs to be used for. So it's not good that we save money, because this is not just money being saved as an expense. This is money being saved in terms of capital investment, in terms of strengthening our industry. And therefore, if we save this money, this is detrimental for our industry. So in summary on this particular point, the squatter problem, companies like Access Clean Mobility and Elest hold PLI approval, but they're blocking the budget with 0 sales recorded as per Vahan. We have taken the data from all government sources. So Vahan is a place where we have taken the data from. They have not had a single sale, and that's extremely detrimental. Next slide. So the risk of inactive PLI players. Now, if you look at it, in fact, this was one of the questions that somebody was asking me before we started this particular conversation, is how much has the government really spent on PLI? Now the total allocation was 25,938 crores, and the inactive beneficiaries are locking up this 25,000 or almost 26,000 crores, with 91% of these funds not being spent at all. So only about 2,000 crores has been disbursed. The rest is all locked in. And out of the 9 applicants approved, only 4 are performing. So less than 50% are actually performing. So why don't we get in more players who are performing and disburse more of these funds, so that we can take up the might of the electric two-wheelers coming in from across the Himalayas. What are the other unintended consequences? In just 3 years, the market shifted from a diverse ecosystem to a concentrated oligopoly. As I mentioned, when there is new technology, you actually want more players to come in. In fact, from C-DEP, we have also been asking the government not to put too many regulations on AI, not to put too many regulations on other new technologies, because this is not the time to put regulations on a technology which is still to mature. Obviously, if there is something extreme, then the government needs to step in, and the government did that. When there are deepfakes being spread, the government came out with regulations. Similarly, if we are having consolidation in the market for electric two-wheelers so early in the game, we will end up losing the vibrancy of the market, we'll end up losing new products, the competitiveness of Indian players, and so on and so forth. So if you see from 2021-22 to 2024-25, the PLI players had 13% of the market share. They now have 74% of the market share. And if you saw, there are only 4 PLI players. So only 4 people are now dominating 74% of the market. The rest of the players who had 86% of the market has now flipped to only about 25% of the market, and that's going to go become smaller and smaller, because you can't compete against somebody who's getting a 16% benefit. Your margin per scooter will be 5%, 6%. Now somebody else is getting 16%. You just can't compete. So is that what we are looking for, or do we need to tweak some things in PLI? That's really what's coming out of this study that we did. And same as what I said a little while ago, China built not 100 plus but 200 plus players in the two-wheeler. So the four-wheeler they have 100 plus, in the two-wheeler they've got 200 plus players, whereas in India it's largely moving towards only 4 players plus maybe 2 or 3 more who are growing in spite of the PLIs being stacked against them. What we need to do at this stage is actually go out and encourage many more electric two-wheeler startups. I mean, who's manufacturing electric two-wheelers for the delivery that happens to your home? Who's manufacturing electric two-wheelers that are for the local run, and therefore they need a smaller capacity of battery, lower margins, cheaper bikes, so that many of the gig workers can therefore start gaining employment. If all of that and our gig worker economy is dependent on two-wheelers coming from China, that's a big problem. How do we solve this problem? So we've got problems at both the lower end of the two-wheeler two-wheeler vehicles, as well as on the high end of the two-wheeler vehicles, which is motorcycles and delivery vehicles. Both are getting question mark. The doubling down of the players is happening only in the areas where the government has given the PLI, and that's what continues to be focused on. Next slide. So this is the innovation trap. The policy signal is that investment, size and scale matters, and therefore that's what people will do. That's what PLI is clearly saying. You invest more, you scale up, you have 10,000 crores of turnover, and you will get more benefit. You will become even bigger. Why should anyone do anything else? If I am a listed company, it will be ultra wise for me to spend money on anything but scaling up, because that is what's going to get benefit to my shareholders. And therefore the investors will react in that manner. Therefore the market outcome will be that there will be the entire supply chain, entire distribution, charging and so on and so forth will be based on the existing 2 or 3 kinds of two-wheeler electric vehicles. The result will be that electrification and platform diversification will get stifled, which will then lead to the outcome that that PLI has led to results, which is what we started off with, and PLI has led to results. There has been a steep increase, But is that the result which is a strong foundation for future growth? That is really the point. And clearly from our study, that's what's coming out is that is not the only direction. That is important. Having scale is important, but also having innovation, product diversity, exports, being able to retain our markets outside of India. Those are also important dimensions that we need to focus on. Next slide. And therefore, the policy options that comes out is open a targeted window for innovation-led OEMs. We have the budgets. Can we go in, because there have been PLI squatters who have not been using the PLI, and therefore can we align the auto PLI with the PM e-drive localization benchmarks? If there are entities which have already qualified for the localization benchmarks of PM e-drive, why not just simply co-opt them into PLI also? And that saves in terms of bureaucracy, in terms of people running around, in terms of lead times every month, every quarter is critical for startups. So that could possibly be a way forward. Recognize PMP compliant OEMs, demonstrating localization depth, introduce objective innovation criteria, granted patents, in-house manufacturing of core EV subsystems, proprietary vehicle platforms, enable technically capable firms to access PLI as a scale, preserve incentives for existing beneficiaries. So we see that in the top 10 players that we have, can we go down from the top PLI beneficiaries and go to the rest of the non-PLI beneficiaries, pick them up, tweak the PLI as per what I just spoke about right now, and therefore introduce more players to the PLI. Second is introduce performance review mechanism, define minimum annual commercial production thresholds. You can't just take in PLI and then sit on it for whatever reason. There may be valid reasons, or there may be reasons where you wanted to raise funds, money, bank loan, whatever the reason may be that you could not do the production. But time is important from an Indian industry perspective, and therefore we need to have a performance review, reassess entities failing milestones within review period, reallocate the released fiscal capacity in subsequent rounds, and align with review mechanisms used in other PLI schemes. So PLI cannot be static. We have declared it, we say it's for 4 years or 5 years, and then that's that. That cannot be the way we should be looking at PLI, given that we see that PLI is not achieving all the outcomes that it is supposed to achieve, and therefore, as like with any other schemes, we need to have a review mechanism for the outcomes, not the output, but the outcomes. And output will be so many million two-wheeler electric vehicles manufactured, but that's not good enough. The outcomes are much more than that. Third is possibly consider adopting a first come first serve mechanism, which means that whoever is able to meet the benchmarks of PLI, they can go in and file in their request for getting the PLI funding, rather than having an upfront allocation and a quota for PLI. We can have many more players being given the PLI as long as they quickly come in and submit the fact that they have aligned with the PLI requirements, and therefore getting the subsidy. That will also lead to much more intensification of competition, because the players would then like to achieve the benchmarks of PLI rather than sitting back for 5 years, 6 years, that we have it, we have the PLI, nobody else can get it, so we'll take our own sweet time. But if we have first come first serve basis, there will be intense competition unleashed in the market, and it will also give opportunities to those who can prove themselves without having a large criteria of 1,000 crore turnover, 3,000 crore fixed assets, and so on and so forth. As long as you achieve the outcome, you can get the subsidy. So that's a policy innovation that perhaps the government should look at. And finally, introduce segment-specific innovation incentive. So offer additional 3 to 5% PLI for, say, electric motorcycles, because otherwise nobody is building electric motorcycles. Models exceeding 70% of domestic value addition. If you have been able to raise to having 70% from within India, then you will have control over the cost. If you got control over the cost, therefore you can compete elsewhere. Otherwise, let's put it bluntly, the Chinese are going to eat us up for breakfast. So the only way to stop them is to be able to have a significant amount of domestic value add and have export-oriented production. Are we giving a push to the PLI beneficiaries to have exports done. That's not there. Recognize higher engineered and capital intensity, and improve alignment with electrification priorities. Just give me a second, please. So the bottom line is these refinements preserve scheme integrity. In fact, it preserves what is the intended outcomes of the schemes while improving innovation alignment, fiscal utilization, and long-term value chain depth, right up to the mining of the sand that is needed, which is moissanite sand needed for extraction of rare earth, extraction of the 15 rare earth and critical minerals. So right from there to the two-wheelers moving in the market, to them moving in other global south markets, that's the entire outcome that we need to look at. And that's what's going to lay the foundation for a much stronger two-wheeler industry in India that can take up the might of the other producers in the world. So with that, it covers what we have found in the report, and it covers what we believe the government should be considering in terms of the next steps of tweaking the PLI and making it more aligned to the interests that we have been that the government had as an outcome of the PLI. So we're open to questions, and then perhaps we'll go around the table and see if anyone has any further viewpoints and any other questions. So any quick question, we'll start with that, and then we'll go around the table. Yes, please.
This question is for the industry representatives here. One of the parameters for the government to disperse the PLI was also the extent of localization being achieved by the industry. So firstly, my question is to understand how do we benchmark localization? How is the government doing that? And has there been any progress on localization by the EV players in the industry?
Surendra, you want to take that question? You can release this.
So basically from the DVA side of view, domestic validation is something where testing agencies are setting by checking the entire inventory and everything. So whenever you are procuring something from out of India, so you need to declare that part to the testing agencies, and they are certifying whether we are meeting the criteria of 50% DVA in the particular vehicle or not. And the basis that they are declaring eligibility. Interesting part is that despite all those things, DVA is common for PME drive and PLI scheme. The people who are audience who are qualifying for the PME drives are actually meeting the requirement of PLI. So, but still they are not part of the PLI because of whatever the policy limitations there. But from the DVA point of view, everybody who is registered under the PME drive schemes, they are meeting the requirement.
So shall we start from the right hand side, the gentleman at the end? Sorry, I can't see your name tag, but do you have any questions, anything that you would like to add? Yes. Just giving the microphone, the gentleman in the next person, yeah.
Hi sir, Alok. Hello.
Yes.
सर
नहीं सुनाई दे रहा है, आप बताइए.
मेरा सवाल सर आपसे है कि आपने जितने चीज़ें की पॉइंट आउट की वो PLI स्कीम में ये प्रॉब्लम, ये गलतियाँ, ये चीज़ें ठीक है, और गवर्नमेंट की जो PLI स्कीम है वो कहीं ना कहीं काफ़ी उसमें खामियाँ हैं. तो और चाइना से हम लैग कर रहे हैं, लेकिन डिमांड एंड सप्लाई एक चीज़ होती है. इलेक्ट्रिक मार्केट में यदि हम देखें इंडियन मार्केट का जो कंडीशंस है उसमें जो IC इंजन है, पेट्रोल की जो गाड़ियाँ की डिमांड क्यों है और इलेक्ट्रिक की गाड़ियाँ कहाँ पर लैग कर रही है, तो आप देखेंगे कि कहीं ना कहीं डिमांड मिसमैच है या डिमांड है ही नहीं. मैंने भी कई इलेक्ट्रिक स्कूटर चलाया, बाइक चलाया, तो कहीं ना कहीं लगा कि यार जो हमारी ज़रूरत है उसको फुलफिल नहीं कर पा रही है ये गाड़ियाँ. तो जब तक डिमांड निकल के नहीं आएगा, आप जो बड़े प्लेयर, आप जितने भी बड़े प्लेयर हो, बजाज हो, हीरो हो, वो भी जो है तो कहीं ना कहीं इसमें इंटरेस्ट हो नहीं करे. बजाज ने अभी हाल फिलहाल में एक स्कूटर लॉन्च किया फिर से. तो जब तक डिमांड और जब तक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, बड़ी गाड़ियों में जो चार्जिंग स्टेशन है वहाँ तो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है. आप देखो जो गडकरी ने बहुत डंडे मार के जो इलेक्ट्रिक रिक्शा है, सब जगह इलेक्ट्रिक रिक्शा उन्होंने कर दिया, लेकिन अब उसका क्या हालात है, क्या मतलब कितने प्रॉब्लम फेस कर रहे हैं. तो कहीं ना कहीं जो पॉलिसी लेवल पे चीज़ें हैं, जो डिमांड लेवल पर चीज़ें, जो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के लेवल पर चीज़ें हैं, वहाँ पे बदलाव की ज़रूरत है। PLI स्कीम ठीक है, उसमें सुधार हो सकता है, उसमें चीज़ें हो सकती है, तो आपका क्या ओपिनियन है इस पर?
पहली बात यह है कि हम ये नहीं कह रहे हैं कि PLI गलत है, उसमें नुक्स हैं। हम ये कह रहे हैं कि अभी जो हमें सीख मिली है PLI से, उसके बाद हम PLI में क्या फर्दर सुधार ला सकते हैं। इट्स ऑलवेज अ कंटिन्यूस प्रोसेस। ये नहीं कि बंद हो गया एक बार सोच लिया तो और कभी नहीं सोचेंगे। दूसरी चीज़ है, आपने काफ़ी सारे व्हीकल्स के बारे में बताया जो इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स हैं, लेकिन आपने फिर ई-रिक्शा के बारे में बताया। अब वो बहुत अच्छा एग्जांपल है, क्योंकि आप ई-रिक्शा में देखिए, क्योंकि वो फैल गया, उसका दाम बहुत कम है। आप क्या देख रहे हैं कि ई-रिक्शा की जगह में वहाँ पे कोई कंपटीशन है जो IC इंजन में चलता है, कि कोई किसने छोटा मोटर किसी रिक्शा में लगा दिया और उसको चला रहे हैं। 2009-10 में CSIR ने एक प्रोडक्ट शुरू किया था, सुलेक्षा बोल के। CSIR है सरकार का जो रिसर्च एजेंसी है। तो उन्होंने ये बताया कि जो हमारे एग्जिस्टिंग जो रिक्शा है, जहाँ पे लोग बैठते हैं, ऊंचा सा रिक्शा होता है, उसमें हम मोटर और बैटरी लगा के उसके ऊपर एक सोलर पैनल भी लगा देंगे तो उसमें मदद होगी। और जब उसका बैटरी ख़त्म हो जाएगा तो जो पैडल कर रहे हो पैडल करके चलाएंगे। क्या वो फैला? वो नहीं फैला, जो भी कारण है। लेकिन एक चीज़ फैलता है जब उसका एक इकोनॉमीज ऑफ स्केल आ जाता है, डिमांड होती है। और डिमांड तब होती है जब उसका दाम कम होता है, दाम तब कम होता है जब उसका डिमांड होती है। ये चलता रहता है। इसलिए मैंने वो शब्द इस्तेमाल किया कि वर्चुअस साइकिल, कि जैसे वो बढ़ता है तो और बढ़ता रहता है।
मेरा सवाल वही है ना कि डिमांड है ही नहीं, जो आप जो
मैं आज की मुझे 2 मिनट दिए, मैं बताता हूँ। क्योंकि जो उत्तर होता है उतना सीधा तो होता नहीं है, क्योंकि प्रश्न भी कॉम्प्लेक्स है, समस्या भी कॉम्प्लेक्स है। तो आपको क्या दिखता है कि रास्ते में 2 व्हीलर जो ये ई रिक्शाज है कहीं पे चार्ज कर रहे हैं? कहाँ पे आके चार्ज करते हैं? आपने देखा है कभी ई रिक्शा चार्ज होते हुए? पर चार्ज हो जाते हैं और आपके सामने वो तैयार रहते हैं। तो ये जो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर का प्रॉब्लम है वो तभी सॉल्व होता है जब ई रिक्शा जो वॉल्यूम्स हैं वो ज़्यादा होता है। और वॉल्यूम तब भी ज़्यादा होता है जब ये प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व होता रहता है, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर का, चार्जिंग का, फलाना ठिकाना। तो इसलिए सरकार ने क्या किया कि जो डिमांड बढ़ाने के लिए उन्होंने पहले फेम 1 सब्सिडी लाए, उसके बाद फेम 2 लाए। अभी भी आप देखेंगे जो इलेक्ट्रिक 4 व्हीलर्स हैं उसका दाम बहुत ज़्यादा अधिक है IC इंजन से, क्योंकि IC इंजन तो 100 साल तक एस्टैब्लिश हो चुके हैं। उसका जो सप्लाई चेन है, उसका जो कंपोनेंट्स है वो बहुत ही आसानी से मिलता है। लेकिन इलेक्ट्रिक 2 व्हीलर में, इलेक्ट्रिक 4 व्हीलर 2 व्हीलर जो भी आप देख लेंगे, आज चल रहा है, कल चाइना ने पीछे से कुछ बंद कर दिया, हमारा प्रोडक्शन ही बंद हो गया। और इलेक्ट्रिक क्यों, नॉन इलेक्ट्रिक भी बंद हो गया था उसी कारणवश, क्योंकि पीछे से चाइना ने रेयर अर्थ्स और सेमीकंडक्टर वगैरह बंद कर दिया था। तो इसमें अगर आपको डिमांड बढ़ाना है तो आपको दाम थोड़ा थोड़ा घटाना है। दाम तभी घटेगा जब आपका कंपटीशन आएगा। तो हम
70% कॉस्ट बैटरी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग का है इलेक्ट्रिक EV में, वो स्कूटी हो या फिर बाइक हो या फिर आपका जो है 4 व्हीलर हो। हम कोई बैटरी मैन्युफैक्चरर नहीं है हमारे पास, हम सारे इंपोर्ट पे हैं, कहीं से चाइना से आ रहा हो या दूसरे जगह से आ रहा हो, लेकिन हम इंपोर्ट करते हैं, हम मैन्युफैक्चर नहीं करते हैं। तो हम कॉस्ट कैसे कम कर लेंगे? जब तक हम मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में नहीं जाएंगे, जब तक उसका इंफ्रा नहीं डेवलप करेंगे, जब तक इतने बड़े पैमाने पर इन्वेस्टमेंट नहीं होगा, तो कैसे हम कॉस्ट कम कर लेंगे? क्या इंपोर्ट से कॉस्ट कम हो जाएगा?
आप सही चीज़ बता रहे हो। हम भी वही कह रहे हैं जो आप कह रहे हैं कि आपका बैटरी, मतलब बैटरी मॉड्यूल्स मैन्युफैक्चर हो रहे हैं, जो बैटरी सेल्स है वो बाहर से आ रहे हैं, मॉड्यूल्स यहाँ पे मैन्युफैक्चर हो रहे हैं। जो BMS है, इनफैक्ट सरकार ने ओपन सोर्स BMS भी उसका प्रस्ताव दिया हुआ है कि सारा इंडस्ट्री मिला के एक बैटरी मैनेजमेंट सिस्टम यूज़ करे, उससे उनका R&D का कॉस्ट कम होगा। लेकिन जो भी होगा वो फ्री मार्केट के हिसाब से होगा। पॉइंट ये है कि सरकार को जो स्टेप्स लेना चाहिए। अगर आप सरकार हो, आप क्या करेंगे? आप सब्सिडी देंगे? क्योंकि मैं तो दुगने दाम पे मैं कोई व्हीकल लूँगा नहीं, आप भी नहीं लेंगे। तो
सब्सिडी कभी सस्टेनेबल मॉडल नहीं रहा है।
नहीं, तो सब्सिडी का जो पॉइंट होता है ये नहीं होता कि अगले 100 साल से सब्सिडी देंगे। उसका ये पॉइंट होता है कि डिमांड इतना बढ़ जाए कि पर यूनिट कॉस्ट घट जाए, उसके बाद सब्सिडी हटा देंगे। तो अभी भी जैसे आप देखेंगे चर्चा चल रही है कि सब्सिडी अब हटा दें, क्योंकि 2 व्हीलर वगैरह में जो पैरिटी है, कॉस्ट पैरिटी है, सरकार को लगता है कि कॉस्ट पैरिटी आ गया है। हमें लगता है कि अगर कॉस्ट पैरिटी आप इंडिया में देखेंगे तो शायद आ गया है, ग्लोबली नहीं आया है। तो वो जो इश्यूज़ है वो डेटा ड्रिवन होना चाहिए, नी जर्क नहीं होना चाहिए। तो आप और हम एक ही बात कह रहे हैं, उसका जो इम्प्लीमेंटेशन मैकेनिज्म्स हैं उस पर हम चर्चा करते हैं कि वो इम्प्लीमेंटेशन शॉर्ट टर्म सब्सिडी देके हो, जैसे फेम 1 ख़त्म हो गया, उसका शॉर्ट टर्म था, फिर सरकार को लगा कि वो काफ़ी नहीं है तो फेम 2 इंट्रोड्यूस किया गया, वो भी ख़त्म हो गया। फिर 2024 में PM E-ड्राइव लाया गया। अब जो अभी जो चर्चा के डायमेंशंस हैं वो सिर्फ ये नहीं है कि इलेक्ट्रिक टू व्हीलर हम अडॉप्ट करें, उसका ये भी है कि इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल से हमारा जो पोल्यूशन है जिसमें लोग मर रहे हैं वो भी कम हो। तो अगर एक्स्ट्रा हमें सब्सिडी देना पड़े तो देना चाहिए। तो जो एक्सट्रेनियस और जो कंसिडरेशंस हैं वो चालू हो जाते हैं आना। लेकिन पॉइंट वही है जो आपने शुरू किया कि डिमांड बढ़ाना है, उसके लिए दाम घटाना है और सब्सिडी देना है। कब तक? जब तक वो IC इंजन के साथ पैरिटी ना हो जाए, या सरकार बोले कि हम IC इंजन तो बंद ही कर देंगे, उसके बाद सब्सिडी देने की ज़रूरत नहीं है। अगर आपको चलना है तो आप मेट्रो या बस ले लीजिए, जो इलेक्ट्रिक बसेस हैं। अगर आपको खुद का व्हीकल खरीदना है तो जो भी दाम है उसमें खरीदिए, हम सब्सिडी नहीं देंगे। लेकिन जब तक IC का ऑप्शन है तब तक उसके साथ पैरिटी आना है। तो तभी आके जिससे आपने शुरू किया कि डिमांड बढ़ेगा, जैसे डिमांड बढ़ेगा इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर साथ में बढ़ना है। अभी आप देखिए इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर रोल आउट हो गया था, चार्जिंग स्टेशंस। अगर आपके पास EV आप जाके चार्जिंग की कोशिश कीजिए, नहीं होगा, क्योंकि उसके किसी ने तार काट के ले गया है, किसी का पीछे चार्जिंग नहीं चल रहा है। तो अगर आप इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पहले रोल आउट हो जाता है जो इंडियन सर्कमस्टेंसेज और कॉन्टेक्स्ट में, तो फिर डिटेरियोरेट करने लग जाता है जब तक ना वो इस्तेमाल हो।
थैंक यू सर, थैंक यू सर।
सर मेरा एक सवाल है। पहला सवाल है टू व्हीलर मोटरसाइकिल को लेकर। मोटरसाइकिल पर फोकस काफ़ी कम दिखता है और पता नहीं सस्टेनेबिलिटी का इशू है या कोई और इशू है, वो थोड़ा सा बताएं। दूसरा, जैसा कि आपने भी उसके बारे में जिक्र किया, और दूसरा है कि जो इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स है, खास करके स्कूटी वगैरह के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में मैं बोल रहा हूँ कि सर्टेन आग वगैरह लगने के कंसर्न्स हैं, तो उन कंसर्न्स को कितना एड्रेस कर पा रहे हैं? क्योंकि कई दफ़ा मैंने भी सोचा तो कई लोगों ने आगाह किया या फिर मेरे भी जहन में एक कंसर्न पैदा लिया कि पता नहीं, तो उसको कहाँ तक आप लोग एड्रेस कर पा रहे हैं?
नो, जो आप पहली चीज़ कह रहे हैं कि मोटरसाइकिल्स, इलेक्ट्रिक मोटरसाइकिल्स क्यों नहीं है, जबकि ये मार्केट मोटरसाइकिल्स की ही मार्केट है। जो हमारे युवा लोग हैं वो मोटरसाइकिल्स प्रेफर कर रहे हैं, जो भी कारण हो। लेकिन इलेक्ट्रिक मोटरसाइकिल्स के सप्लाई बहुत कम है। इसका कारण एक ये है, जो मुख्य कारण है कि इस मोटरसाइकिल्स का इंजीनियरिंग बहुत अलग होता है। उसका जो पावर डिमांड है, एक्सेलरेशन डिमांड है, वो अलग होता है। और युवा लोग मोटरसाइकिल्स इसी कारण प्रेफर करते हैं क्योंकि उसमें पावर ज़्यादा है, एक्सेलरेशन ज़्यादा है, लुक्स अच्छा है, एंड सो ऑन एंड सो फोर्थ। सो हमारे जो स्टडी है उसमें भी यही निकल के आ रहा है कि मोटरसाइकिल्स में ज़्यादा कुछ इनोवेशन नहीं हो रहा है, और जो भी हो रहा है वो नॉन PLI प्लेयर्स कर रहे हैं। तो उनको थोड़ा बढ़ावा देना चाहिए, उनको भी PLI के दायरे में लाना चाहिए, और वही वे फॉरवर्ड है। सो कम्प्लीटली एग्री ऑन द फर्स्ट पॉइंट कि मोटरसाइकिल्स पे फोकस होना चाहिए। और हमारा उसके साथ एक और पॉइंट है कि अभी तो हमें स्कूटर मालूम है, मोटरसाइकिल मालूम है। 100 साल पहले क्या था? मोटरसाइकिल भी नहीं था, स्कूटर भी नहीं था। सो हमारा जो नेक्स्ट जनरेशन ऑफ व्हीकल्स हैं वो कौन करेगा? अगर आप पहले से डिफाइन कर देते हैं कि हमें ऐसा ही चाहिए, 2 ही पहिया चाहिए, ऐसा ही चीज़ होना चाहिए, तो हमारा फ्यूचर इनोवेशन नहीं होगा। लेकिन जो बड़े इंडस्ट्रीज़ बनते हैं, जैसे अगर आप सैटेलाइट बेस्ड कनेक्टिविटी देखेंगे जो इलॉन मस्क ने किया है, वो तो 10 साल पहले नहीं था। तो ये जो नेक्स्ट जनरेशन ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजीज़ हैं उसके लिए हम बढ़ावा दे रहे हैं, नहीं दे रहे हैं, वो आपके प्रश्न के साथ यह भी प्रश्न जुड़ा है। तो दोनों में हमें प्रश्न चिन्ह है, उस पर हमें देखना चाहिए कि PLI का रोल क्या होगा उसमें। दूसरा आपका क्या प्रश्न था, मैं भूल गया।
ये जो स्कूटी है, स्कूटी में आग लगने की घटनाएं,
हाँ, स्कूटर, गाड़ी सभी में। तो अभी आप देखेंगे कि ये घटनाएं बंद हो गई है, एटलीस्ट मुझे तो दिख नहीं रहा है अखबार में वगैरह, क्योंकि जितने भी प्लेयर्स हैं जिनके साथ भी ये हुआ, उन्होंने वो निकाला कि क्या क्यों हुआ, और वो जिसमें जो इंजीनियरिंग का नुक्स था उन्होंने उसको ठीक किया, और अभी मार्केट में मेरे ख्याल से सारे स्टेबल मॉडल्स हैं।
थैंक यू।
Shall we go like this if you don't mind? फिर पता चलेगा कि कोई मिस ना हो जाए बीच में. हाँ, really sorry. Yeah.
Maybe.
We'll just move to the lady next to you.
First of all, thank you for the presentation. My first question to you is, as you mentioned that there are 4 active PLI players and 4 inactive. So the names that we have in inactive are mostly unknown, at least for me. So what were the criteria? Like the government has set criteria, they have qualified for that. So why there is no follow-up for this? And what happened with these 4? Like why there is no production? Have you researched about this?
Yeah, so that'll entail.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I had a similar question.
Sure.
Just to add on to that so you don't waste time in answering it. Like you talked about the midterm review that should be done. That is your suggestion, but what is the government doing right now for these inactive players? Like is there something in the scheme? Is there or there's nothing at all that the government has right now? That's just details on that.
Yeah, so first of all, why were they given? That's for that we need to file an RTI. That is not our objective. We are not an activist organization. We are here just to support the government. That if the PLI had certain objectives, was it met or not? If not met, then what more needs to be considered? In terms of what is the government doing for those who are not performing, well, the answer is they are not being given the subsidy, right? So there is no loss from a financial perspective. There is no loss to the exchequer, but there's an economic loss because that subsidy is not being used. That much of economic activity is not happening, and therefore the foundations of a future industry is getting weakened. So it's an economic loss, but not a financial loss. Now, obviously, the government has to, on a daily basis, work on the financial principles. So that has been taken care of. There is no leakage of subsidy that's happening, and therefore, both your questions leads us to what we have concluded, that there should be a midterm review. That has not happened, and more players should be brought in during that midterm review, because in a fast-moving nascent industry, things change on a yearly basis, on a quarterly basis, things change. So players who have been performing don't perform. One of the players was number 1 by a huge margin, and then they haven't sold anything as per Vahan data. So those are the changes that happen, and therefore for a nascent young industry, there has to be a very frequent dynamic review of the PLI, and that's the outcome of your question really. These are good questions. Yeah.
Would you go further on the economic loss that you're talking about?
Yeah, so let's just fast forward to 2030, right? So if you pull the graphs forward in terms of our domination in Africa versus Chinese domination in electric two-wheelers, the total electric two-wheeler market will start going down. Let's look at Africa. Why will it start going down? Well, many of you should counter-argue and say it will not, because Africa has got a huge problem in terms of electricity availability. So you can get fuel because that can be carried, but there is no electricity available freely. So why are we saying that there will be a reduction of ICE and movement towards electric two-wheeler? Because we see there is a massive upscale adoption of solar panels in Africa. And if you have solar panels, you will move to electric two-wheeler, because if you look at the hills of Kenya, if you look at the deserts, if you look at non-oil producing countries, if it's not West Africa, then where do you get your energy from? Pretty much like Nepal. Why is Nepal rapidly moving away from ICE scooters and motorcycles to electric? Because it is hugely expensive to bring in oil from the Kolkata port right through Raxol and then take it in through all the hills and distribute it. It's massively expensive. But if you put up a solar panel, you can refuel your vehicle then and there, and it's cheap. And that's the same phenomena which is playing out in Africa. So the writing is in the wall. By 2030, the dominant mode of transportation will be electric. And because these are global south, not so advanced economies, per capita income is low, it will be two-wheeler electric vehicles that they will be going for. And we have hardly any share in the electric two-wheeler vehicles. And for that, for the last 5-6 years, the government has been targeting to strengthen our industry here. But what is happening is our industry here is focusing on the Indian market rather than the African market. The same holds true for LATAM and for all the other global south markets. So if we are a big fish in a ocean that is drying up, then our market share will be minuscule in these countries. And if you've got a minuscule fish in a pond which is going to expand into an ocean, then we lose out in the new ocean that's getting created.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Vikram from EY. So, going by this particular auto two-wheeler EV PLI scheme, found two critical things which I think this government has not considered. Not criticizing it because it's coming from the legacy of the all the PLI schemes started from mobile manufacturing and all. So they have created two things: the eligibility criteria for domestic value addition. I know every government wants to be aggressive to do all the stuff to bring in manufacturing. That doesn't happen overnight. China also took almost a decade and all. Similar, what they tried to do, the similar thing which tried to do the advanced chemistry cell scheme as well, higher domestic value addition, and in this particular aspect as well. That's why it has failed. Second most important thing, they are not looking for, even if you are bringing in any kind of PLI scheme, they are not bringing looking into the component as well. For example, the components of this EV two-wheeler, just like cells and other components, we are hugely importing it from China. Although we did with ACC, advanced chemistry still was there, but if you see all the players who got the PLI scheme, they haven't done much of the work. For example, there were 30 gigawatts was there. Ola was just able to make it out of 1.5 gigawatts. There's another Reliance and other company who are really a big, I would say, big deep pockets. They also didn't do such kind of work. So, in this as well, most of the legacy and the incumbent players got the PLI scheme, not the innovation-led model and all. So that's the thing which is really been missing, not to see each and every scheme from eyes or the lens of this mobile manufacturing or any other scheme for that. The second question I have, if you could just elaborate on this, which is adopt a first come first serve mechanism. Would like to have some highlight on this, right? Why I'm coming from this, because I work for telecom industry, and where we saw many of the stands like 2G and all. So I know it's not related, but would really like to have some deep dive into this particular policy outcomes. Thank you.
So let me take the first one in terms of why this kind of a structure for PLI. So it didn't just start from mobile phones. It actually started from phased manufacturing scheme for auto in 90s, 80s, 90s, where they said that if you are able to produce the steering and the windshield in India, then you'll get this much. And finally it came down to the gearbox. If you localize the gearbox, then you'll get this much, and so on. And because of that, we are a dominant player in automobiles. And if you look at it from the 80s and 90s perspective, you couldn't have a startup. We didn't have that ecosystem to have a startup and build a new car, right? So it had to be existing players or players backed by the government, such as Maruti. And so that has continued, and that has continued to the current age, where even if you look at the mobile phones, it is a game of large players. You can't have startups coming, because mobile phones, there isn't much innovation per se. Since the time iPhone came out, it's still a slab. iPhone did put in a patent on the slab with round corners as being a patent, and then went to war with Samsung on that, and a patent war, which are all pretty silly, but that's what happened. There isn't fundamentally any significant innovation happening in that space. And there are also the whole issue of WTO regime, wherein we said that the current phone, the smartphone, is not part of the international trade agreement, the information trade agreement, the ITA-1, where ITA-1, there was no smartphone when it came out, right? When ITA-1 came out. So yes, zero BCD was allowed at that time, but for button phones. And our argument was that we did not sign ITA-2, and smartphone is not the same as the button phone. So we should put up a customs duty. But the moment we put in a customs duty, we need to ensure that there is somebody who's building things up in the country. The two policies have to go in tandem. We also knew that we will lose the judicial inquiry in WTO as and when that comes up, and that promptly came up, and promptly we lost it in the next couple of years. And then we did what the US has been keeping for themselves, which is take this whole issue to the appellate authority, right? Why? Because the US had already sabotaged the appellate authority. There's no appellate authority. In the meantime, what has happened is from being a non-player in the global mobile phone market, we have become the dominant player. Now bring back ITA 1, ITA 2, ITA 3, we don't really care because now we are the dominant player. We have the economy of scale. So our costs are lower, right? We are exporting about $30 billion worth of phones to the US, right? Which is huge. I believe 20 billion to US and then 10 billion to other countries. So those are huge exports that we are doing. So now when we replicate that, because these are all success stories, right? If I am a policy maker, I'll replicate that. It has worked for the last 40 years. Why shouldn't I replicate it? But when we replicate it to something like a electric two-wheeler, which is nascent, which is not a stabilized technology, then perhaps we need to look at those who are innovators, and clearly the data is saying so. So that is what the background is to this study.
So why I was trying the analogy, not to compare with the global mobile manufacturing, because every 2 years or even in 1 year, most of the people just change their mobile because of various issues. But for a two-wheeler kind of an, I would say, product, most of the people in India keep the two-wheeler in more than 20-25 years and all. So in the EV industry, we just cannot take it from the lens of the what we done in the 90s and what we did with the global, the smart mobile manufacturing and all. So that's what I wanted to say.
So perhaps true, but then the question will be, let's take that characteristics, because you pointed out a very valid characteristics that scooters and two-wheelers are owned for a longer period of time. So what is the policy tweak we should do in PLI, given that characteristics? That's really the exam question in that sense. So let's look at it. I don't know what will be the impact of that on PLI, but clearly when we look at it from the lens of innovation and in terms of exports and making our foundation much more robust, there are a bunch of tweaks that is needed in the PLI. So that's the point. And as you rightly pointed out, Indian markets and characteristics are different. So perhaps there are more dimensions that needs to be brought in. We are just looking at what PLI said it's trying to achieve. Has that been achieved or not? And if not, then what more needs to be done? Yeah. You also had a second question on first come, first serve.
How this would be get implemented if government tries to?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
No, I just want to ask.
How will it get implemented? Which one? The first come, first serve, or?
First come, first serve.
Yeah. So the nomenclature is little misleading. I wouldn't even say misleading. It just has these connotation of first come, first serve licensing.
Correct.
During the 2G regime. Well, those are two different things, two different contexts, right? It's not a license being given, and that license had tremendous amount of value, billions of dollars worth of value, and therefore there was a question mark. And you can't just say that whoever woke up in the morning and came to your door first is the one who will be given license in a multi-billion trillion dollar industry. In this particular case, what we are saying is that, let's say, the two of us, let's say there's 1,000 rupee of subsidy, Anushka also applies, I also apply. Then she could have gone and manufactured enough to consume the 1,000 rupees worth of subsidy. But she was only given 500 rupees. So she did that. I did nothing. I probably looked around and said, sorry, if somebody can close the door because it's disturbing the photographers also. So I don't produce anything. And therefore that 500 rupees is not getting used. Even worse is that he could have actually come out with a new vehicle and manufactured that and use that balance 500, which I'm not using. So what we are saying is, forget about application, right? If you have produced it, right, in the end of first year, you have produced so many localized vehicles, then go submit that proof and take the money and walk out. That's the first come, first serve. Not upfront, but subsequently. Yeah.
I'm Pooja Das from Down to Earth magazine. I have a few questions related to two topics. One being critical minerals and the other is SEC PLI battery scheme. So now that every country, all the countries are incorporating critical minerals as a key discussion point in their trade deals, agreements, because they realize how important that is after China cut off the supplies or put random restrictions.
Sorry, जब भी आप आएंगे ना बंद कर दीजिएगा दरवाजा.
So I just wanted to understand, when we are trying to diversify our supply chains for critical minerals, especially rare earth,
where we are right now and how long may it take for us to get those critical minerals in collaborations with any country. And the second being, when we are talking about ACC PLI battery scheme and it has been awarded to several OEMs, but there hasn't been much progress. What's the future of it? And after we have seen China putting restriction on rare earth magnets, magnets exports, what if it cut off supplies of raw materials for batteries? What do we do then?
So in a few days back, I put in this tweet as my thought of the day. If you use power, you lose power. So China can use the rare earth threat only once. Why is that? Is because very quickly the world across India, Brazil, US, that we are very well aware, are racing towards producing rare earth. Now I'll differentiate between rare earth and critical because there is no definition of critical minerals. That's a country to country definition as to what is critical for them. Rare earth obviously is a chemical element and therefore it's well defined. The challenge in India is that the moissanite has 17 rare earth and critical minerals, out of which 2 is uranium and thorium, which means that you can't really privatize that part, or we need to have something similar to the Asha bill, which allowed private players to get into the nuclear sector, to somehow get them to do the mining of the sand and thereafter have some oversight of the government and then ensure that there is enough supply so that after that the 15 critical minerals and rare earth are extracted. Within that extraction process, we do have the technologies in the country. Also, as most of you know, rare earth is a bit of a misnomer because it's not that rare. It's widely available. India is supposed to have significant amount of deposits. Supposed to have is I'm using that word because again, when we delve deeper, there is a question mark as to what we really have and what we don't have, because some of these surveys are by the US and these are guesstimates or rough numbers being put in. But we are not in a bad space in terms of supplies in that sense. What we need to do is move from the availability to extraction to purification, to the alloy making, to the magnet making, right? In fact, between the alloy and magnets, the requirement for the alloy will also vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. If I am manufacturing a certain kind of two-wheeler or four-wheeler, I would need certain characteristics which I will then create in conjunction with the alloy manufacturer and the magnet manufacturer. In the situation where China is a supplier, we are providing all the IPR to the Chinese manufacturers, and therefore that's another reason why we need to have this within India. As we speak, there has been a PLI scheme already declared for rare earth magnets and extraction, and post extraction, the purification and the alloy making and the magnet making. And so everything takes time. It will take time. It will happen, but governments are racing towards ensuring that they got self-sufficiency in both rare earth and critical minerals. Critical minerals, there is a separate committee that has been set up which is looking into the matter and ensuring that we have self-sufficiency.
One follow-up question here. So what is the realistic timeline of when we are talking about the scheme announced by the Indian government on rare earth permanent magnet? But what is a doable timeline for that? Because 5 to 7 years, I don't think that's enough for us.
No. 5 to 7 years is inclusive of looking for the deposits. Now, many of the deposits are already known. Also, many of the technologies are working in the lab, the extraction technologies and so on. From that stage, so 5 to 7 years inclusive of looking for where the deposits are, to creating the technologies, to scaling it up, to stabilization. Stabilization is another critical part of this chain, because you can have the technologies in the lab, which we have. We also are manufacturing some pockets a ton, 2 ton, but that's not good enough. When you really scale it up to industrial scale, then things start breaking down and you have to fix it, right? It's always a work in progress. And so yes, it'll take time. How much time, we don't know. We don't know because China started in 1980s. Deng Xiaoping went to Inner Mongolia, came back and said in 1980 that rare earth is China's oil. That was a vision 45 years ago. So look at the lead time they've had. So when we start catching up, obviously it'll take time. It may be faster than 5 to 7 years. It may take more than 5 to 7 years. It really depends. In the current ecosystem, if you ask me and my bet, I think it will take less time than 5 to 7 years because of a whole horde of private sectors who are jumping in. Availability of technology is a matter. In fact, coincidentally, yesterday only, Manoj and I were having a discussion with a large producer on getting into rare earths, and they have adjacencies. So people who have been producing magnets want to get into rare earth. People who have been extracting minerals of other kinds want to get into rare earth. So there are multiple such players who are getting in. Given that the local demand will be huge, it makes sense for people to get in. But there is also a lot of risk involved because the technologies is not stabilized, and stabilized technologies are firmly controlled by China. Also, there is a large patent pool that controls all these technologies. So if you build something, it will willy-nilly step on existing patent that is already there. So it's going to be a bit of a longish journey, but joining hands across multiple countries would help, and that's what the government is doing.
I had another question on CCP.
Yeah, the PLI battery issue. Our report has not gone into the PLI battery. We have focused sharply on the two-wheeler electric PLI. Maybe the next report could be on PLI battery. Thanks for giving a heads up.
My turn. Hi sir, my name is Manas. I write for Mint. Firstly, I apologize for being a little late, but I have had a chance to go through the report, and the chapter number 5 is something I'd like to ask about. Chapter number 5 is unintended consequences of the PLI auto scheme, where you talk about distortion of fair market competition. Could you tell us? So I understand the data. I understand what the data analysis shows. It's pretty clear. Could you tell me what do you mean to convey to, let's say a layperson reads this?
Yeah.
Is this a bad thing? Is this a good thing? If you could explain.
So clearly it's a bad thing. And why? I think another gentleman had asked that question that PLI was work for mobile phones, phase manufacturing work for autos. So what's wrong with electric two-wheelers? What's wrong with electric two-wheelers is that it's not a settled kind of a technology. It's rapidly evolving, and therefore, if innovation was happening in the current context of PLI, then we can tick mark and move forward. Not a problem. If there was enough exports happening, tick mark, not a problem. And then the gentleman on the other side also asked, what about motorcycles? If 74% of the market is motorcycles, Bajaj pivoted to 100% motorcycles, but when they came out with the scooter, they came out with the grand old name of Chetak and a beautiful scooter that they have created. But they're not doing things like Ather is not there. I don't know if anyone else, any of the manufacturers are there. Some of the startups are Ultraviolet as an example. Yeah. They are coming out with the technologies, but they're not getting the PLI benefit. And therefore, that's a distortion that's coming in this kind of a market, in terms of electric two-wheeler market. And hence, it's a bad thing because players are taking the taxpayer money to kill competition rather than to create a strengthened two-wheeler electric market where technologies are owned. You're beating the Chinese in Africa and LATAM. If that was happening, all was good, but all doesn't seem to be good.
I thank you. I understand. Just wanted to see. From what I've heard and what has been told to me by some policymakers, the idea for a PLI scheme was to create, replicate sort of the national champion model that has been followed in, let's say, South Korea, right? China also.
No, China.
Oh, China. Yes, the China model. So while you argue that this erodes sort of the fair market competition, does this also not promote? this particular report is about electric two-wheelers, but if you look at cars, for example, you have two very clear winners in the list of approved applicants and the list of approved models, which is your Tata Motors and your Mahindra and Mahindra, who have some 20-30 models approved already across vehicle segments. It's creating a sort of national champion for those few segments. Is that not correct?
Yeah. Now, on a lighter note, it seems that we're having chai bol pe chacha.
Yeah.
So that works for stabilized technologies. I would have an issue if we had an Indian Tesla and that was not getting PLI and Tata and Mahindra were getting PLI. If there is no alternate player, then clearly when you got economies of scale, you're able to negotiate with your vendors far better. And therefore your cost starts coming down, and that has a ripple effect throughout the economy, and therefore you become more and more dominant. The whole purpose of being a manufacturer in India is to leverage the massive domestic market in order to get the economy of scale and unleash that competitiveness to the rest of the world, and therefore gain jobs and economic growth that would have otherwise gone to somebody else. That is why these national champions are important. In fact, one of our reports that we're coming out with is talking about need for national champions even in telecom. We don't have the equivalent of Huawei or Samsung and so on and so forth. So we are saying, why don't we turn some of our existing telecom manufacturers into national champions? So that holds true when there are no other innovation, and the objective is beyond just one product line. Here we are talking about a product line which did not exist 10 years ago. Electric two-wheelers did not exist 10 years ago. So trying to put a PLI on it is good, it's important, but we need to make sure that the other objectives of PLI are not lost. Right. If there were no startups, if there were no Ather, if there was no Ultraviolet, there were no other players, then what is happening is good. But there are. And we don't want to get slipped back into an ambassador versus Fiat kind of a situation.
Well, thank you.
Hello, Dr. Bhattacharya. I understand the core element of the report, like what is missing, what is not working. I have another set of questions from the policy side. The first question is, what is really stopping non-PLI players to get entry into the PLI scheme at the moment? I mean, I understand the conditionalities for that, but your number also says that it's actually the non-PLI players who have been performing well. So, yes, we also believe that price parity that was a major hindrance would be achieved very soon, maybe another 2 to 3 years. So there is no reason for me as a government to continue my PME drive sort of a demand for subsidy kind of scheme. PLI, yes, it's a supply side. As a private financer, I would invest in any non-PLI player only if I see their business model to be a bankable and scalable model. Now your numbers clearly tell me that they are scalable. So accessing market simply not because of lack of finance and therefore not scale themselves to become eligible for PLI doesn't seem to be a right proposition. So what really then is a problem statement for non-PLI players? Is it a bankability proposition? Is it a scalability or both of them?
So point number one is the assumption that they're doing extremely well. They're doing well individually, but when you look collectively, they've shrunk from 80% of the market to 20% of the market, roughly speaking, right? So they're not doing well in that sense, collectively speaking. Individuals, like again, because Ather is sitting here, I'll take Ather's example, and some of the other players, they're doing well individually, but we need many more players in this. Second, what's stopping them from being part of PLI? When PLI came out right after COVID, everybody was in a bad shape, right? And if you look at the numbers, for a startup to have 3,000 crores of fixed assets, that's humongous. So they couldn't get in there. Those who have done well since then, there is no PLI open for them now. So that is why we are saying let's review it and get them in, those who are doing well now. Third, it is not just them, there needs to be more players. Those who don't exist right now, there needs to be some mechanism of encouraging more players to come in, because that's what the industry needs if we are looking at the future. So those are the three criteria, three reasons That one, it's not that all of them as a collective, the non-PLI players are doing well, they're not. Those who are doing well did not get the entry when PLI opened up. It was post-COVID situation. Right now there is no opening. In fact, the next point that we're even worried about is that if PLI gets extended to the same players for another 3, 4, 5 years, that will destroy the well-performing non-PLI players. And hence it needs to be relooked. Therefore, your second question, that what stops him from getting in now, it's a very critical question, and that's what our recommendation is, that open it up again. Let's relook at it. Sir, over to you.
Hi, this is Karthik. I'm from C-DEP. My question to you is how can circularity, particularly by second life applications or battery recycling, be integrated into the policy in order to strengthen the localization and long-term competitiveness?
Put another PLI for those who are in the circular economy. No, sorry, we haven't looked into that. So we at C-DEP, we don't shoot from the hip. We don't have the data. We haven't looked at it, frankly, as to how to bring in circularity. Obviously, there are very, very crucial questions and issues around it. People will pop up with the battery part to begin with. How can we recycle batteries? How can we recycle all the electronics in it? Because as somebody was talking about mobile phones, all these new vehicles are gadgets. They are like mobile phones. In fact, they are roughly the same cost as mobile phones in that sense. A mobile phone, a high-end one, costs about 1.5 lakhs. The electric two-wheeler vehicles are also costing that or lesser. I'm pretty sure in some time maybe the behavior will also change, where people will not own them for 20 years. They'll probably own them for 4 or 5 years and say, I want a new violet-colored two-wheeler electric vehicle, right? So all of that will happen, which then accentuates your question that if that happens, then what happens to the recycling part of it, and who recycles and who's responsible? Will it again be producer responsibility that will come in? So will the Aethers and Bajaj and Royal Enfield, will they be made responsible for recycling it? What about the rare earth and the critical minerals going in the electronics, into the chips? There are about 16 to 17 processes that goes into one single scooter. What happens to them? All valid questions. We have not looked at it in this report. Maybe in another time we should look into it, but important questions. Ma'am.
But do you think auto PLI scheme play a significant role to improve domestic manufactured sales?
As per the graph that we showed, it did play a very important role, right? It shot up 40 times. Electric two-wheeler sales shot up 40 times. There could have been other factors at play because COVID just got over, so maybe people were just buying it. Also, maybe because it's cheaper to run an electric vehicle, a two-wheeler electric vehicle on a daily basis. So that could be a reason. But primarily the causal effect, we believe, is because of PLI. The 40x growth happened because of PLI. Now there are still constraints. For example, if you're living in an apartment, they will not allow you to put up a charging point. They will not allow you to put the scooter there and charge it, which is where innovation starts coming in, where some of the manufacturers are saying you can take the battery out, take it to your apartment, get it charged and bring it back the next day. So depending on the environment that we are operating in, the innovations are coming in, and PLI has definitely played a very critical role. We'll move here. I'll just take your microphone and pass it.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful report. Wanted to understand, is it, when we spoke about data from 2019, right? Why have we looked at this scheme in isolation and not spoke about FAME at the same time? Because 2019 to I guess 2022-23 FAME was a very strong scheme, especially for two-wheeler sales. So the descendants of FAME is PM E-Drive, right? So we have taken a PM E-Drive, and if you look at that Venn diagram that we showed, where all the players have got PM E-Drive and all the players have got PLI, and then the intersection was some of these players who have shot up to the top 4 because they got both, right? And therefore we are saying if you've got PM E-Drive, then the criteria are roughly the same. So one should be automatically given the PLI also. And therefore, answering your question, why did we not consider FAME 1, FAME 2? We did, because we considered PM E-Drive.
And
No,
the
but
issue is
PME drive had significantly very
Sure.
minimum incentives
Sure.
compared to FAME 1 and FAME 2.
sure, but the focus of our report was actually assessing the PLI scheme and not the FAME scheme, because I think enough analysis has been done on FAME and has been sunsetted. So if it is done and dusted, there's nothing to tweak on. We are looking at live policy changes. So what is live right now is PME drive and PLI. But it'll be worthwhile to look at what did FAME achieve at that point in time. There were some misuse of FAME also, and then the Minister Moth came down heavily on it. The weak hybrid versus strong hybrid, all of those happened. So that's a different set of issues which is not what we were looking for at this point in time.
Interesting. My next question was actually that, because when we came to allotment of PLI schemes to legacy players, heavy players, right? Was it also because the new entrants had heavily violated the FAME 1 and FAME 2, and there were massive fines, and then basically came and my point is, didn't these startups, right, if I call them startups, really violate the market and made it better for the legacy players by what they did themselves?
So 2 points. One, it was not just the startups, it was also legacy players who did that. I will not take name because that's a negative thing that happened. And also, having said that, if X players did something wrong, then Y players doing it is generalization, right? So it's like President of the United States saying there's one illegal immigrant who's driven the truck wrongly, but there are 1,000 other citizens who are also driving the truck wrongly. But taking a generalization of that is not correct. So what had happened in FAME 1, FAME 2 is done and dusted, and the learning should be that the policy itself was not crafted well, which is why it got misused. Human enterprise will find out ways and means to leverage every policy. So they did not misuse it in the sense that they misrepresented. They leveraged what it said. It never said that your hybrid should be of this type and so on and so forth, right? And therefore we are saying let's look at PLI also and see what is working, what is not working, and therefore tweak it. In fact, it's almost like saying since FAME did not work, let's make sure PLI succeeds in that sense. Yeah.
Interesting. You also spoke about the export market, and I think the data point there was that the models that are under PLI scheme are not exported to great numbers. Right? Isn't the same in case as ICE? Because in ICE also, majority of two-wheelers, what they export to markets, especially in Africa and otherwise, they're entirely different models of what they sell in India. There are even some models which are not even available in India, but because of what the market demands in, let's say, the continent of Africa or maybe Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, the models, this has always been different.
No, sure, but it's based on existing models. It's based on existing frames, right? Unless you're talking about BMW, which obviously is.
So then BMW is again.
No, that's a different
Europe,
case. Yeah. So that's why I'm leaving it. Manufactured here.
Yeah.
In fact, that segment is completely manufactured in India. Same as one of the models of Harley Davidson, completely manufactured here, and so on and so forth, right? So that's happening. But the fact that we are nimble-footed and we are creating models or tweaking model which specifically for the target markets shows how good we are, which is what the Americans didn't do for the Indian market, as an example. They just took something which is outdated, plonked it into India and said, Indians will buy this. And it didn't happen. They got wiped out. So it's a good thing. It's a virtue that we're talking about, that Indian players are able to do that. They're not exactly the same as the PLI models. Are they even based on the existing PLI models? Are they even the same players? They're not. Right? That's the issue.
Interesting. You also mentioned inactive squatters.
Like Ather was sitting here. I mean, they are exporting significantly. They are not a PLI beneficiary insofar as we know.
But they don't come with the legacy burden. You're also mentioning inactive squatters.
So why should legacy be a burden? Legacy is an advantage because you have distribution points. You got your existing salespeople selling IC products. It is just an incremental cost for you to sell electric products. So why are you not selling electric products? For a non-legacy player, it's an uphill task to set up the distributorship, the dealership, supply chains, finding your counterpart in Nigeria, your counterpart in Botswana, and so on and so forth. These are complex things to do, which have been already solved for legacy players. So we just want that. So we're not looking. We don't want to differentiate between legacy and startups, but we look at it as an Indian industry. Is Indian industry getting strengthened or not? The answer is no. Whoever does it, it doesn't matter. Be it startups, be it legacy players, and therefore can PLI play a role? And therefore, what is it that we should tweak in PLI?
You also mentioned about inactive squatters holding some amount of PLI, right? Now, at one point, the report says that there have been, financial clauses to whether you can apply to PLI or not, and then there have been instances of inactive squatters. So, how do you balance the both? How does the government balance the both? If I am government, I am giving out PLI based on innovation only. How do I know that this startup, this new company would not be an inactive squatter?
So one we are saying is that how do you define innovation in terms of measurable metrics, because it can't be discretionary. I can't say your innovation is better than his innovation, other way around. So the measurable metrics is how many patents you have filed, how much exports you have done, and so on. And we are saying let that be the metric, and let the manufacturers come back after meeting that metric and then say now give me the subsidy, rather than giving them almost a license upfront. So PLI is almost a license. We want to avoid that licensee kind of Raj. I wouldn't call it license Raj, it's not. But that kind of regime should not be there.
That's actually a very heavy term. One last question. If I look at Ether, if I look at ultraviolet, right, they're largely successful because they did very good innovation. But then they were funded by the legacy OEMs themselves. They saw merit in these OEMs, in these startups, but others, there have been a lot of fly-by-night players, right? So, is it right to say that the capital does not exist because of, I remember the chart that you had shown, right? But on the other hand, we have the legacy OEMs pushing, gunning down, investing heavy amounts into the startups themselves.
So we have not looked into the color of the capital right now. What we are saying in terms of capital, we are not saying is it easy to raise capital or difficult to raise capital. That's for the entrepreneurial energy to find out where to get capital from. What we are saying is the criteria that has been laid out by PLI. So we are putting the benchmarks as super high. We are saying entrepreneurs should go in and get a net worth of 1,000 crores, which basically means equity money of 1,000 crores. Sorry, net worth was 3,000 crores and revenues of 1,000 crores. Humongous amounts. No, you can't simply go from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in a fraction of a second. You need 10-15 seconds to do that. So it's more of bringing in a parity in the PLI, and therefore the tweaking of the PLI. Right? And whoever funds, it's good. If the legacy players funds, that's great. We don't really care where it's coming from. But once the government policy gets aligned, everything else will get aligned, right? Everybody else will come in. So maybe the legacy players will start investing into ultraviolet even more. Maybe they would like to share technologies. Maybe they will give them their dealerships to sell the ultraviolets along with somebody else and share money on that. So let the free market go. We do not want the government to interfere with the free market, but where it's interfering, which is giving subsidy to some players and not giving to other players, therefore distorting the market, there we should do very, very carefully.
Thank you.
I actually have two questions, but then I have to excuse myself. But my first question was around the battery recycling and the circularity, which you've already answered. My second question was around the gender dimension. I didn't hear any mention of whether the PLI scheme is trying to mainstream any gender integration into it. Are they giving any sort of extra subsidies or is there an extra criteria for having women entrepreneurs, etc. in it? Or women-led startups, etc. in it? And then the second question that I have is around what is the sort of communications gap that exists for this PLI scheme? Is there any awareness that is necessary, like at a mass level, at a surround sound discourse level, that needs to be done?
Right. No, very interesting. This is the first time I'm hearing that criteria, and insofar as I know, I don't think any of the PLIs or phased manufacturing had a gender dimension in terms of entrepreneurs or also in terms of usage, both ways. So that's interesting. We'll take it away as a learning. We haven't considered it. We were merely looking at what are the stated objectives of PLI and checking if PLI has achieved those objectives or not. So that's interesting. In terms of circularity, we already mentioned what we mentioned. Again, that's not something we were looking at. Very interesting things to do, but maybe next time we'll do that.
Just on the communications, if you have.
So communication is not a problem because all those who are manufacturing, they get to know.
Okay.
They get to know that there's a PLI scheme. Nobody has come back to us saying, "Oh, we didn't know," or the deadline passed. That has not happened.
Okay. Thank you.
Sir, I have one question.
Yes, sorry, I missed you. Yeah.
Companies like Ola are facing a lot of headwinds today. So what's your take on this?
So if you can use the microphone because it's getting recorded, so for the recording.
Companies like Ola are facing a lot of headwinds today. So what's your take as a...
I don't know. We have not looked into that. Why they are facing headwinds? We know the same as what's there in public. So we have not asked them, and in an open market, they will get rewarded or punished for whichever way they service their customers, and if they're doing well, they will, from a PLI perspective, they will get rewarded from PLI, and I think they have scaled up very well. It's one of the success stories in that sense. And as I said a little while ago, let free market prevail. Let there be fierce competition on a level playing field. All that we're talking about is a level playing field. So that we avail the objectives that we're talking about with a level playing field. And then Sadamini also talked about a level playing field from a gender perspective. That's something we had not considered. So it's these are conditions we are looking at. Specifically, what's happening to Ola, we will not be able to comment on.
Hi, my name is Ram Mishra from Republic Media. Basically, my question is, PLI scheme is currently 5-year completed, right? So basically, metro cities are already using the two-wheeler, but rural areas, local areas not be currently using for the EV two-wheeler. So what is government step for the rural area for? Because awareness is not be very well according to currently situation, because 5 years is completed but not the percentage of growth for the according to metro city. So what is the process for the awareness creating for the
So I don't know why it's not getting adopted in the rural areas. Again, we have not studied it in detail. It could be multiple reasons. Availability of electricity could be a reason, but we have largely seen that most rural areas now are electrified, and actually electrified, not just that the main line is coming and being left at the substation. It's actually being taken up to every home. So is it the issue that there is no dealership, there is no servicing, which if that's the case, then market will take care of itself. If there are certain provisions that needs to be done to push the market players to get into rural areas, like what we did with telecom, right? We had a special money kept aside, which then helped telecom penetration in the rural areas. Should we do something similar? I think it will be based on the data that we get. If it's really true that electric two-wheelers are not penetrating the rural market, where they really stand to gain, because charging and running those scooters or vehicles is much cheaper than going and refilling the tank with petrol or diesel or whatever the case may be. So why it's not happening? It could be a technological issue also. Maybe the range needed is not there. Maybe the load carrying capacity is not there. But unfortunately, we have not looked into that dimension.
Second is India is the largest two-wheeler, but actually currently is depend on the ether and everything depend on China. So because Modi government is also made in India. So what is the I depend on the China. When will be sorted for the Indian make in India for the ethylene or other export or import and the China?
I think the lady there was talking about 5 to 7 years for the last piece to fall into place, which is the rare earth alloys, the heavy rare earth magnets and so on. So my gut feel is the same. 5 to 7 years time will be completely free of any geo-economic leverage being pressed on us from other countries and specifically China.
PLI scheme is only for the large capital, Bajaj any other benefit for the, but local some small capital is not using the PLI benefit. So what is the scheme for the any other vendor using for the?
See, again, that was the point that was raised on national champions, right? If you're taking public money, will you bet it on people who cannot deliver, or will you bet it on people who will surely deliver, right? So if there are smaller players, all we are saying is let them have a level playing field. It should not be that larger players come in, also take government subsidy, and then squish you out. Which is why we didn't have a problem with mobile phones, because there were no small players, they were all large players. We have a problem with electric two-wheelers because there are small players, and therefore the question that you raise needs to be answered, that if they come in, how do we ensure that they have a fair access to the market? Because if I give somebody else a subsidy compared to you, as it is you're small, your cost of operations is high, your economy of scale are not there. On top of it, the existing players are getting a subsidy. You will never ever be able to compete, and therefore you will not even be there. You will close shop. That is what we want to avoid in the electric two-wheeler market.
Thanks.
Same question, sir. तो मुझे आंसर नहीं है.
Hi, thank you for the interesting presentation. I'm Sumati from the International Council on Clean Transportation. We're a policy think tank. So I have two questions. One is on the aspect of deglobalization. So while you talk about the PLI scheme helping in localization of the components, what does the localization of the heavy machinery and the high technology machinery look like, which goes into the manufacturing of these components? Because my understanding through interactions with industry players, and even if there are OEMs here, is that there is still a lot of dependence on imports when it comes to the machinery which is required for manufacturing of electric vehicles. So what this essentially does is that on one hand we're saving on the forex by localizing the supply chain for components, but there is still a huge outflow of foreign exchange happening because we're still having to import heavy machinery. So if you have any insights on that. And then my second question is, you mentioned that you've observed that the non-PLI players have been pushed out of the market and there is like a stifling of competition happening. So on the methodology bit, have you been able to establish a direct causal relationship through econometric models, or is it just a sort of an observation that has happened after the PLI scheme has happened? Because considering the global economy, there has also been a slowdown and that has also sucked out a lot of the investments that were earlier happening. So I just wanted information that have you isolated the impacts of other parameters that might be contributing to the competition being wiped out from the market?
Yeah. So the first one, in terms of capital investments, things go step by step. There will be machinery, the capital machinery being manufactured in India if there are enough number of manufacturers coming out in India for the need for the capital machinery. Now, the right thing to do would be look at the balance of trade on just capital machinery. We're exporting a lot more than what we're importing. Now, for every subsystem of an electric two-wheeler, you would need a different kind of capital machinery. For example, the semiconductors part, you would need fabs, which are multi-billion-dollar investments which are happening. So these are all work in progress. These are things which are happening as we speak. We've got a lot of capability in precision manufacturing, especially in the last 5-7 years that has come up massively. The capacity that we have in precision manufacturing is huge. In terms of rare earth, because that's the flavor of the month, every single end-to-end process needs about 1,500 crores of investment. So from the mining to the cleaning to the extraction to the purification to the alloying to the magnet creation, the whole thing takes about 1,500 crores. Those investments are coming in again, and the baby steps have already been taken at a furious pace. So maybe the word baby steps is also not correct, but one by one the steps are being taken at a very, very fast pace. So things will fall into place as we start scaling up, and as the market gets created. Why wouldn't people start manufacturing the capital goods here? It just depends on the market size. And the second question you asked was about, I forgot the second
It
question.
was on the methodology that have you been able to establish a direct causal relationship between the fact that the PLI has directly led to the competition reducing, or is it more like an observation?
Yeah, so added to that, you also said that things might have been impacted by the global situation. Now, what we're looking at is within the market, how much was being provided by PLI players and how much was being provided by non-PLI players from the time that PLI was declared and how that moved. So there are a couple of graphs we had showed that clearly after PLI, there the weightage of how much the PLI players were producing and their ranking shifted massively. From about 20% they went to about 80% of the market share. So clearly that's the dominant effect. Is it worthwhile to look at every single econometric parameter? We didn't think so. If there is something substantial, we also reached out to the industry players to ask if there was anything else that was impacting their sales. The answer is no. So it's not worthwhile because we can go into as much of complexity. If the learning is the same, roughly the same from a policy making perspective, then it was not worthwhile for us to adopt any other methodology. So that's why we went with what we had. Yeah. If you don't have any questions, you can skip. And yeah, please go ahead.
Also, from the looks of it, it looks like the government currently is favoring champion
Do you want to take that question?
OEMs for the PLI scheme. But the EV ecosystem largely is also dependent on MSMEs providing components. So can we have a similar champions kind of a scheme for MSMEs also?
So no, the concept of national champions is just this, that there is a mothership and everybody feeds from that mothership. So you will not have component players in Korea if there was no Samsung. So therefore you create what somebody said, chai bowl pe charcha. So if you have these chai bowls in Korea, because they're able to dominate the global markets, therefore their sub-assemblies, subsystems, components, they are coming from MSMEs. And therefore they are growing as Samsung grows. And hence the concept of national champion is, can we have large national champions in India in various sectors, be it electric two-wheeler, be it telecommunication and so on, so that the MSMEs and the subsystems grow along with these national champions.
Thanks, Arun Prakash from Hyderabad. Before I head to my question, because we were initially at the discussion of why electric motorcycles haven't been able to penetrate into the electric two-wheeler segment. Obviously, complex technology is one of the key reasons. One of my insights, being a motorcyclist myself, is that motorcycles have a wide number of use cases, much more than a scooter. A scooter is meant to be convenient and daily utilitarian, whereas motorcycle needs to do a lot more of that stuff, more than that stuff. You know, it's meant to cruise on highways, go on, unexplored regions, and so it has a wide variety of use cases. So unless and until when you label it a motorcycle, it is thought of it has to do a lot more than a scooter. So unless and until those conditions are fulfilled, then you can't call it a motorcycle. So I think those specifically in terms of range and then infrastructure, unless and until these two criteria are met, motorcycles will be a challenge to scale. And that is one thing I found observed. Now heading to the question, so you spoke about linking auto PLI scheme with PM e-drive scheme. So first of all, for a lay person, how would you differentiate between these two schemes? Means how are they differentiated as far as allocation of funds is concerned? And if you are able to link both of these, if you are able to link both of these, what hurdles and bottlenecks could be cleared, or will you face them in process?
Right. So on the motorcycles part, I completely agree with you, and therefore it is complex. In terms of what's different between PM e-drive and PLI, PM e-drive is a demand side subsidy. So when I go and buy an electric two-wheeler, I get a few thousand rupees off it. So that subsidy is actually to me and not to the manufacturer. PLI is to the manufacturer. That if you meet these criteria, then the government will pay you that money, and which is where it raises another question: does that money come on time, and is it really getting paid off, and so on and so forth? But that's a different set of issues. But that's a difference. One is supply side subsidy, one is demand side subsidy. And we are saying, since the criteria for giving that subsidy is similar, why create layers of bureaucracy? Let people who are getting PM E-Drive also get PLI, and therefore things can be accelerated.
So, again, is the incentives or the subsidies under the PM E-Drive scheme attached to the cost of the vehicle when the consumer is buying it? Is it meant to be that way, or is it just?
It's a fixed number.
It's a fixed number. Okay. So it's attached to the price, right? Means what you paying upfront. When a consumer pays upfront, the PM E-Drive.
They get that money back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, the price that they get is, the published price is lower.
Yeah.
So it's not that they are shown that they have to pay 1,20,000, but they're paying 1 lakh. That doesn't happen. They simply pay 1 lakh.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, is there any last question before we call this meeting to a close? Anything else? Great, thank you so much. I think it was very, very insightful to get your questions. It gives us a lot of thinking to do, and also gives us ideas on what next we need to focus on. The point really is, as C-DEP had been said to do, is focus on the domestic industry and make sure that the domestic industry overall is strengthened. And that's the only way we can bring down costs. That's the only way we can be more competitive. That's the only way we can ensure our technological sovereignty, which is a word a term I'd coined way back in 2005 and has since been very, very popularized. And therefore, we are doubling down and ensuring that the domestic economy and domestic industries are strengthened. With that, I'll hand over to Anushka for the closing comments.
So,
sorry, just one more thing.
yeah,
And before she takes, I just want to thank the authors of this report, which is led by Anushka, Akira. If you can just raise your hand, yeah, there you are. She's hidden, and Dipanjan. The three of them put this report together. Thank you so much for your efforts.
Thank you, Jayjeet sir, and thank you everybody for participating in the roundtable discussion. It really helped to know us which were the nuances, which are the dimensions that are currently, we need to more work on. Like there are multiple external factors which also need to be countered in, and hence give us an idea for the, maybe to also start a series on the impact assessment of the auto PLI scheme, where we can look at multiple segments. Where is the fiscal space going? How's the allotment happening? What the money which is committed, how it is, coming back into the market. So there are multiple dimensions that we need to look at, but one consistent challenge which we even faced with this specific segment or during the report was also the sourcing of the data. The data sourcing is really a big challenge, be it coming to what is the localization levels which are being achieved, say example, by a TVS. If they are reporting that they are localizing to this particular, a percentage, how do we get to know? And what are the other industry players who are also localizing? So there's a lot of data, sourcing challenge we have faced. So these are certain constraints and considerations that we'll have to take forward. But regardless, the discussion was really insightful, and it helped us to know where we can take this how we can take this forward, and what are the other dimensions that we need to look at. So yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for the team, everybody who helped me in getting this report actually here and presenting it and making sure that we have the discussion. And yeah, we will be then collating all these comments and would make sure that it reaches the right people in the industry, in the government. And yeah, thank you so much for being the part of the policy dialogue. Also, yes, the lunch is being served downstairs in Dome. So yeah, you can take the lift or the stairs and just take the...
just at the, in the lobby level.
Yeah, so yeah.
On the
Thanks.